Hidden among the ghost stories and UFO mysteries is a strange world of very creepy enigmas. Strange letters, inexplicable disappearances, whodunits, and the sense of paranoia linger in the darkest, unexplored corners of unsolved conundrums. Number 10. The city of Syracuse, New York was left shaken by a sinister mystery that rolled across the area. It was being subjected to an onslaught of threats, spanning several years. The first attack was in 1997, then 1999, 2002, 2010, 2011, and finally 2012. The mystery took the form of letters, each containing a bit of white powder that the author claimed was anthrax, a toxic and often fatal substance. 5 of these letters made their way to the Bishop Ludden High School from 1997 to 2010. Another 3 turned up at the Lemoyne College from 1999 to 2002. One of the letters made its way to the office of Anne-Marie Burkle, another to a library supplies manufacturer called Gaylord Bros. Another 11 found their way to the military, police, government officials, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and even celebrities across the East. Syracuse was in a state of panic. They'd just been exposed to anthrax, according to the writer, who claimed, quote, "The paper and other materials that you're holding in your hands have been thoroughly laced with anthrax spores." It was a daunting realization. But most strangely, no one was developing symptoms of toxicity. They were fine, as healthy as ever. Tests into the mystery substance would reveal that the purported anthrax was nothing more than laundry detergent and baby powder. The threats were all just one big hoax. Although this called for a sigh of relief, the series of attacks revealed just how easy it was to cause a mass poisoning event undetected. For 15 years, the fake anthrax threats would continue, initiating panic each time, all over again. Who was doing this and why? What was the significance of targeting Syracuse? These questions lingered in the minds of not just the residents, but the FBI too, who began a public plea for information that may lead to the conviction of the author behind the 21 letters threatening anthrax exposure. Linguists and other experts suggested the writer was a man, around 35 years of age during the last set of letters. They suggested he may have had a connection to the mental health system and may not be able to function independently. Experts named the man eccentric, which caused people to avoid him. They suggested that he had strange ideas that often appear out of context. The FBI also believed that he was annoyed by junk mail or fundraising efforts. Despite the description and a $10,000 reward, the Syracuse anthrax mystery was never solved, and the person behind it all is still out there, possibly plotting his next fake attack. Number 9. Something eerie and inexplicable happened in Alaska at some point during the early 1900s. It began in the 1940s, a time strewn with disappearances that were curious and unexplainable. It was happening on a daily basis. Some would venture off into the wild, some would never be seen again, and others would be found no longer alive. It was a grim period that saw a steep decline in the Portlock population. The unexplained disappearances and bizarre fatalities were enough to rattle the townsfolk. Sheep hunters and loggers, although cautious, would be seen walking into the forests and never walking out again. The rare search efforts would either yield no results or a scene so sinister that they couldn't be explained by local wildlife. Mysterious prints by an unfamiliar beast began to turn up. They measured 18 inches in length. The tracks were once discovered by hunters who'd been stalking a moose, but during their search they would find no animal, just a red-stained scene. As these eerie events began to rack up, a wave of fear sent many of the Portlock citizens fleeing in terror. Exiting their hometown wasn't gradual either. It was as though overnight, plagued by the darkness and what lurked within, the residents decided that they couldn't handle the mystery anymore. Hundreds of terrified people packed up their things and fled, leaving behind their former lives and whatever threat was living in the woods. Some braved a lengthy walk, others fled by boat, leaving behind empty builds and unnerving rumors. Although this place was one of terror for the Portlock community, Modern ghost hunters and adventure seekers exploited the opportunity for a story, hoping to catch a glimpse of the malignancies. They ventured there against the advice and warnings of others. Regarded as Alaska's creepiest abandoned site, Portlock gave the fear-finders exactly what they came for. Disembodied crunches in the woods sent explorers fleeing. Inexplicable growls served as a warning, ones that most wouldn't heed. Others suggested the feeling of being watched, an oppressive presence, and a strange weight in the air. It became clear rather quickly that these weren't just ramblings and tales. Something happened here that sent a whole town running for their lives. Something terrifying. Number 8. For some reason, back in 1949, the United States Intelligence Agency snapped some pictures of the northwest side of Mount Ararat in the eastern area of Turkey. That image was classified as secret. Through the snow and ice, something strange begins to emerge. An unidentified object that has led to an enduring mystery called the Ararat anomaly. It was also that image that prompted religious researchers to ask, has Noah's Ark been found? In 1956, 73, 76, 90, and 92, more images were taken of the mountain's corner, still by the intelligence service, who hovered above the area in planes and helicopters. Again, the images were labeled secret. What were they hiding? The abnormal formation is said to look very ship-like and supposedly share close proportions to that of Noah's Ark, which some now believe may have come to rest on this mountainous expanse, where it was consumed by a blanket of snow. But no one knew about these bizarre pictures until 1995, when 6 frames of the 1949 footage was finally publicly released through the Freedom of Information Act. For years to follow, those intelligence images remained a point of interest, but no one was brave enough to make the venture to the site. With no developments or investigations into the peculiarity, the mystery on the mountain faded into obscurity. But in 2003, a satellite breathed new life into the Ararat anomaly, having taken pictures of the supposed ship breaching an ocean of snow. The defined shape rests at a daunting 15,300 feet, submerged in glacial ice, waiting for confident investigators to dig at it and end a long-standing mystery. As part of the same 2003 research project, another few images were snapped in 2006, leading only to more controversy over what the jutting object could be. Perhaps it was nothing more than a playful shadow, a geological outcropping, or maybe it was something human-made, something that was strange enough to capture the attention of the CIA. No known expeditions have been made to the area to explore the ship-like structure, but if there had been, the U.S. intelligence would probably not tell anyone. Number 7. As more obscure discoveries are being made about our ancient ancestors, it's become increasingly clear that they may have known something that we do not. Spaceship murals, alien-like cave paintings, stories of time travelers, and observations of mythical creatures. Something was lurking in the darkness of ancient times, something that we have yet to face. Among such strangeness, another baffling and eerie mystery has unfolded. It's the puzzling enigma of the ancient ever-burning lamps. Fire played a crucial role in human progress. It could even be considered one of the most important discoveries that steered our ancestors towards evolution. Though discovered by accident, it was fire that gave us life. It was a source of heat, a means to cook food, and protection against the enemy. But most importantly, it illuminated the dark. There was one problem with fire, though, and that was that it didn't stay lit. But the ancients may have found a way to fix this problem, but that solution remains an enduring mystery even today. Somehow, our ancestors created ever-burning light sources, similar to electricity today. But there were no wires or batteries, just an everlasting flame. Based on historical records, these mystery lamps could be found in tombs and temples all over the world. Reports can be found from antiquity right through to the Middle Ages, in which more than 170 authors would write of the strange phenomenon. Writer Plutarch made mention of a lamp that hung above the door of the Temple of Jupiter in Egypt. The torch, according to priests, allegedly stood in the open air and right beneath rainfall, yet it still burned. Similarly, other accounts came from the Temple of Apollo and the Temple of Atterbane. St. Augustine described another Egyptian ever-burning fire, and this one stood in the temple dedicated to a goddess. The lamp was kept inside, not exposed to weather, but efforts to extinguish it by other means proved futile. Augustine declared it to be the work of the devil. In the 13th century, a comparable story arose. It was that century during which a mysterious rabbi named Jekyll lived. Written records place a lamp burning unwaveringly outside of his house with no supply of oil or any such liquid. When inquired about its mechanics, Jekyll refused to reveal his secrets. The most puzzling aspect of this lamp was that if an unwelcomed visitor came to knock at the door, the flame would emit sparks, but would remain steady when an accepted visitor came knocking. In 1540, amid the papacy of Paul III, another lamp would be discovered. It was in the tomb said to belong to Tulliola, the daughter of Cicero. The vault had been sealed for 1,500 years, but the lamp kept burning without oxygen. But as soon as the vault was open and the flame was exposed to the air, it was extinguished. In the 1600s, a similar report emerged in France. It was the story of a soldier who'd found a long-hidden tomb, and inside was an ever-burning lamp. He removed it, and it continued to burn for months with no fuel. It wasn't until he mistakenly broke it that the fire was finally extinguished. St. Augustine referred to these perpetual lights as inventions of incredibly wise and highly skilled men. But how did they do it? Over the years, several theories have come about, but the truth is, we don't know. Number 6. It was January 1951 when 32-year-old Larry Vinther hopped into the DC-3 airliner operated by the Mid-Continent Airlines. The aircraft smoothed along the runway of Sioux City Airport in Iowa. It was awaiting takeoff on the 20th, an evening flight through to Omaha, Nebraska. Everything went as routinely as expected until the control tower radioed an ominous warning. There was an unknown and unauthorized vehicle in the airspace. It floated steadily at 8,000 feet. Vinther certainly thought this was odd and opted to take a closer look. He wasn't aware of any airplanes in the area scheduled for the same time. From the ground, in the air traffic control rooms, this unidentified plane showed up as nothing more than a bright red blip in a darkened sky. From the air, though, that red blip was far more visible. Vinther's DC-3 drew upon the object, and his voice crackled through his radio. He asked this mystery aircraft to blink its lights if it was in communication. The plane blinked once in response, but there was no verbal reply. The silhouette was described as a massive, long and narrow structure. It was cigar-shaped and had an incredible wingspan, wings that jutted straight out instead of sweeping back as they were meant to. Bizarrely, there was no visible cockpit window. In fact, there were no visible windows at all. But the most curious feature of all was the eerie lack of propellers and jet engines. There was physically nothing powering the plane. After successfully taking in each feature, Vinther watched as the mysterious craft took a sudden dive and flew over his plane at a distance of no more than 200 feet. Then it swooped downward, a maneuver that seemed nearly impossible for a craft of that size. This wasn't the end of the dramatic movements, though. Vinther watched as the plane made a sudden reverse of 180 degrees. It didn't slow or slew. Then it was flying right beside the DC-3 before swooping beneath it and vanishing into oblivion, just as mysteriously as it had appeared. When all was said and done, the media caught wind of the story and recited Vinther's observations. The plane was large, 1.5 times the size of the B-29 Superfortress. This gave it a daunting length of 150 feet. Its wingspan was over 200 feet, and they were long and narrow, sharing similarities to a glider. As news of the mystery craft made its way into publications, investigations were underway. One Air Force investigator suggested it could have been a B-36 Peacemaker, which shared a striking resemblance to Vinther's claims. Except the Peacemaker had 2 very obvious propellers and wouldn't be able to perform those odd maneuvers that this craft had. The Sioux City mystery plane was sighted during the peak of UFO mania, but none of those involved in the claim ever stated that it was a spaceship or of extraterrestrial origin. It was explicitly, according to Vinther, an airplane of very earthly origin. But what was it? Number 5. Dragon's Triangle is the place where pure terror and mystery lurk. We all know the enduring story of Bermuda, infamous since the first stories made their way into the public eye, serving as inspiration for novels and films, and sparking intrigue in adventure seekers. The Bermuda Triangle is a mystery, a solution that can only be guessed. A wormhole, waterspouts, a vortex, aliens, rogue waves, or even a government conspiracy have all been offered up as potential answers. As more obscure sections are being discovered, the Bermuda Triangle is beginning to lose its uniqueness. The Bridgewater Triangle, the Bennington Triangle, and the Alaska Triangle are all over the globe, but what exactly are they? Japan's very own oceanic mystery is begging the same question. Hosted by the Pacific Ocean, the Dragon's Triangle dominates a section between Tokyo and the northern Marian Islands. It overshadows Yamatai Island and borders off the coast of the Philippines. Though a relative area has been suggested, the size of this terrifying section is unknown, making it all the more dangerous. Lingering within these waters is something inexplicable, something that's claiming lives, ships, and aircraft, leaving little evidence in its wake. Stories dating back as far as AD 1200 suggest vanishing vessels, soulless ghost ships, disappearing aircraft, and UFO sightings. Genghis Khan in 1274 was one of the first to document his run-ins with the Devil's Sea. While attempting to make his way to Japan, his fleets were swallowed by dark waters, and some 1,000 people were lost. He tried again in 1282, but the outcome was the same. 40,000 crew members gone. In the 1800s, on an island nearby, mariners told the story of a mysterious woman seen floating on a lone vessel, drifting across the Dragon's Triangle. Her identity is unknown, and her destination is a mystery. The 40s and 50s were subject to an influx of several missing reports regarding both fishing and military vessels. They'd enigmatically disappeared between Iwo Jima and Miyake Island, landing them within the Devil's Sea. Not wanting to leave the fate of the voyagers unknown, Japan sent a research ship, the Kaomaru No. 5, to investigate. But as soon as it left the dock, its fate was sealed, and it too was sucked into oblivion. After this, the Japanese government declared the section to be far too dangerous and began to prohibit mariners from voyaging there. The mystery, though, wasn't limited to just ships. Submarines and aircraft had disappeared there too, slipping into the void, evaporating, never to be seen again. In the last 5 years, scores of modern ships and planes have also fallen prey to the unforgiving triangle, disappearing without a trace. Pure fear still lingers around this arcane wedge, preventing exploration and research, leaving any answer lost to the dark waters. Number 4. Serving as a chilling testament to the impermanence of existence is the Sedlec Ossuary in the Czech Republic. Unofficially referred to as the Bone Church, it's an eerie structure of the macabre. Forming the pillars, filling the shelves, and serving as chilling decor are the bones belonging to more than 40,000 humans. It's here that mortality and art converge, creating a masterpiece of mystery. The Sedlec Ossuary can be traced back to the 14th century, a time marred by the Black Death. It was this plague that ravaged Europe, leaving the bodies piling up and nowhere to go with them. In an effort to commemorate the deceased, the monastery was established, but as the fatalities continued to rise, a bigger solution was necessary. That solution ended up being an arrangement of bones, transforming a building into art. The commemoration seemingly took on a life of its own from there. The deceased weren't just simply placed at any available slot, they were made into the furniture. Several chandeliers hang from the ceiling, made from skulls, tibias, and femurs, once belonging to a living person. But who were these people, who now hang as nothing more than a piece of art? This is one of the bizarre mysteries that haunt the Bone Church, the unknown identities of the eerie skulls peering down at any entrant. What were their stories? Who brought them here? Behind each nook and cranny is another unknown story, possibly one of horror, pain, grief, love, and loss. Although viewed as a walk-in cemetery art piece, there's something disturbing about a building strewn with more than 40,000 corpses, whose identities remain a mystery. The sheer number of bones and their arrangement serve as an intriguing enigma. The individuals, whose stories are unknown, exhibit a desire for remembrance. Some have theorized a royal connection, such as knights, soldiers, or other notable people. Among the mystery of identification, there's another enigma that surfaces within the walls. Who's the artist? There are several supposed answers to this question, none of which have been confirmed. Was a half-blind monk behind it all, or possibly a wood carver who simply wanted the ossuary to be something more than just heaps and heaps of carcasses? Perhaps we're not meant to find out, or maybe that answer is lurking within one of the secret chambers, tucked away in the recesses. Number 3. It was the 18th of September, 2001, no less than a week after the infamous attack that was launched in New York City. Citizens were still in a panic, recovering from the loss they'd endured. And just when things couldn't possibly get any worse, they did. It was that day that ABC, CBS, NBC, AMI, and the New York Post simultaneously received the same letter that was sent through the post. AMI was the only receiver located outside of New York City. The station sat in Boca Raton, Florida. But these news outlets weren't the only ones receiving anonymous and threatening letters. A second set was mailed too, and landed in the hands of 2 Democratic senators, Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy. Each letter was postmarked from Trenton, New Jersey. The 2 sets of letters bore some similarities and some differences. One thing they had in common was a strange material that was contained inside of the envelopes. Described as a clumped-up, coarse material bearing a resemblance to dog food, the substance was a mystery. That was until the second set of letters revealed exactly what it was. Bacillus anthracis. It's a bacteria that causes a fatal illness, anthrax poisoning. The bacteria generally appears in soil, affecting wild and domestic animals. There are various forms of anthrax. It can be cutaneous, inhalation, or gastrointestinal. Those infected may experience skin lesions, fever, digestive issues, breathing difficulties, and sometimes they may pass away. It was a harrowing discovery that someone had sent such a lethal material straight through the mail, contaminating several victims. 17 people came into direct contact with the substance, and not long after, many were hospitalized. After the first 5 fatalities, the FBI was on the case. They noted that the 2 sets of notes bore different messages. The notes that made their way to the newsrooms stated, "This is next, take penicillin now," whereas the ones sent to the senators proclaimed, "You cannot stop us, we have this anthrax." They also determined that each note was made using a copy machine. The originals were never found. Each letter was also trimmed to be slightly smaller than the last. The Senate notes used punctuation as well as a fake return address, whereas the other set contained no punctuation or return address. As the panic continued to spread, the FBI desperately needed someone in handcuffs, and although they had no evidence for it, they began to name several suspects. Although these notes were written as though they were from an American enemy, the authorities quickly realized that it was a misdirection. They instead believed that the culprit was a deranged man. Their first suspect was Stephen Hadfill, an American pathologist and biological weapons expert. The Bureau had publicly searched his apartment for any trace of the bacteria, and he was named as a person of interest. The most supporting piece of evidence they could come up with was that Hadfill had obtained an anti-anthrax medication just before Amerithrax took place. This later turned out to be an alleged prescription for an ongoing sinus infection. Next on the list was Bruce Ivins, a biodefense researcher, microbiologist, and vaccinologist. He'd helped the FBI in the investigation until Hadfill was cleared, after which Ivins became a suspect. A 92-page document revealed alleged DNA evidence against him. It was also noted that he was somewhat unstable and had previous run-ins with the law, having threatened and stalked a social worker named Jean C. Dooley. Despite the supposed evidence, though, Ivins wasn't arrested or charged. The DNA was just not enough for a conviction. With no other supporting material, authorities were forced to let it go. Number 2. Suzuki Yoshikazu was born into a family of piano tuners in Tokyo, and he would seemingly follow a similar path, attending a school connected to the Kunitachi College of Music. He would also work in the piano tuning business, and at the age of 44, opened a music textbook sales company, during which he would work with orchestras. He would also dabble in several other music-related businesses, which were seemingly not doing well. But that didn't matter, because around the 1980s, he would find a new, unexpected obsession. It was truly absurd, inconceivable even. Suzuki had become hell-bent on flying across the ocean, sat on a plastic chair, and floated by numerous balloons. It seemed like an impossible endeavor, but he proclaimed that he would make it happen. He would ride a gondola to America and finally pay off his debts. By the 80s, Suzuki had found himself 500 million yen in debt and was being confronted by his collectors. His preposterous effort manifested at the 1989 Yokohama Fair, where he needed sponsors, but the fair was an unfortunate flop. Angered by the lack of interest, Suzuki clambered up a 30-meter tower, wearing the fair's mascot costume, Barua-chan. The staff subsequently called the police, who came with a ladder and attempted to coax the unstable individual down. He merely struck different poses in jest at the situation, before finally being yanked down by officers. He was arrested, which resulted in a bizarre outcome. The fairground staff permitted him to install a balloon ride there. This was a new business opportunity that allowed his clients to fly some 10 to 20 meters off the ground. A simple, fun fair ride. But this small business blossomed into something more because of his obsession with flying across the ocean to America. On the 20th of April, 1992, Suzuki sat upon a plastic chair, 4 balloons decorating it, and took off from Oda. Most unexpectedly, the chair took flight and drifted some 60 kilometers away, despite police efforts to stop him. During the ride, Suzuki unexpectedly lost 2 of his weighted sandbags, leading him to rise another 400 meters, now leaving him at 5,600 meters in the air. Eventually, he crashed and landed after cutting off the larger balloon. Although he damaged a house and its TV antenna, Suzuki was unapologetic and proclaimed he would be heading to Hawaii next. From there on out, he was named Balloon Man. That same year, in the late days of November, he would unveil another aircraft. He named it the Fantasy, which saw the use of 6 balloons, each of which was 6 meters in diameter, and another 20 balloons that were 3 meters in diameter. They'd all been tied to a wooden gondola made from fur. Hungry for recognition, Suzuki invited several news outlets to the show where the Fantasy would perform a test flight. Little did they know that this test flight would document the lead up to an enduring mystery. During the test, the balloon climbed 120 meters and came back down. According to the unhinged man, it was a success. So at 4:20 that afternoon, he climbed aboard the Fantasy and took off, shouting, "I'm going to America," as he departed. According to him, after reaching 10,000 meters, he would ride the jet stream, and within 40 hours, he would be in the United States. For his lengthy trip, Suzuki had packed a week's worth of food, an oxygen tank, a GPS, an altimeter, an emergency signal, a parachute, cell phone, map, blankets, and coat, as well as sunglasses, a helmet, and a speedometer. By the time the trip started, he was already down 2 main balloons, and just before the flight, he'd made several repairs using nothing more than some tape. Despite this, he persisted. It didn't take long before Suzuki had to start throwing things out of the gondola to lighten the load, the first being the oxygen tank. One of the TV stations that was documenting the endeavor phoned the man, and he claimed that the helium was leaking, but that the trip was going well. At 10 p.m. that evening, he called his family and gave them various updates, including that the balloons were looking odd, he wasn't flying high enough, and that he was at sea. At 6 a.m. the following morning, Suzuki made his last call to his family. He said the sun was beautiful and not to worry about him. That evening, the Japanese Coast Guard received an SOS signal, and it was from the Balloon Man. By this time, he was off the coast of Miyagi, where he waved to the Coast Guard. Only 2 of the 4 necessary balloons remained now, and for the next 3 hours, he was closely observed. Suzuki continued to toss things overboard, but it was clear that he wasn't going to make it to America. Despite the close observation and updates across the country, the most bizarre thing would happen. At 2,500 meters into the air, going at a speed of 70 kilometers an hour, Suzuki Yoshikazu vanished. No trace of him or his balloons has ever been found. Number 1. It was January 2002, a cool winter's evening in Poland. The Dec family were engaged in a game of cards, unaware of the dark mystery that awaited them. Just hours later, the mother of the Dec household awoke for unknown reasons and headed to her son's room. It was almost as though she knew that something was wrong. When she walked into the 18-year-old Tomas's room, she found him lying there, eyes wide open. He gave his mother a strange look, one that may have indicated that something was wrong. But without asking why her son was awake, she left the room and went back to sleep. It was 6 a.m. when the family awoke, almost simultaneously, disturbed by a cold breeze drifting through the house. The chill was coming from the front door, which was left ajar. It wasn't until an hour or two later that the Decekis realized that they were one child short. Tomasz wasn't among them. At first, the family thought that he decided to leave for school a bit earlier, a theory supported by the open door. But when they began to look around, strange things started to materialize. In Tomas's room was his backpack, which he would usually take with him. His warm clothes, including his jacket, had also been left behind. After checking the closet, they were able to determine that he was wearing a pair of thin pants and old Adidas shoes, which were definitely not the attire one would expect for January weather in Poland. Missing clothes and the leavings in the room weren't the only things out of place. After more observations, the family came across something more alarming to them. Salt had been scattered in the corners, and a white candle had been left on the table, still burning, the remains of an unknown ritual. Blonde hair dye stained the basin in the bathroom. Among the remnants were a paint-coated plate, a cloth, a comb, and the clothes that Tomasz had been wearing the day prior. Now, with alarm bells going off in their minds, the family made contact with the police and reported the young man missing. While they awaited police intervention, the parents began to reminisce about the peculiar events leading up to this fateful day. Just days before the disappearance, Tomasz had spoken to his mother, suggesting he wanted to become a monk or possibly a missionary. In the months leading up, he also began to behave differently. He became withdrawn and secretive. Tomasz was distancing himself from everyone and even broke up with his girlfriend for seemingly no reason. He didn't respond to any attempts of communication from other relatives or friends and spent much of his time in meditation. Another odd feature that took place on the approach to January 14th was an unexpected trip to a nearby seaside town, 300 kilometers away. His parents had no idea that Tomasz had gone there, and only found out because he'd visited an uncle who lived nearby. Surprised by the uninformed visit, they headed over to pick their son up. When asked about his sudden trip, the young man opted not to reveal why he decided to do it. But when they began to put pressure on him, a strange story would unfold. It spoke of a kidnapping, where he was forced into a car near the train station. He claimed to have lost consciousness and awoke by the sea. This supposed kidnapping happened almost a year before the 2002 disappearance. Months prior to that abduction was another odd scenario. Tomasz had gone on a trip to the same seaside town, supposedly to meet with someone who he'd met previously during a school trip, although given his interest in spirituality, some suggest that these visits may have been connected to the Franciscan monastery. As they were thinking back to these strange events, the police had uncovered some aspects themselves. On the day of his disappearance, Tomasz had been seen at 5 a.m. by a neighbor. He was at a bus stop in the town of Zadowo. The two got on the bus together, and the neighbors soon recognized him. It's uncertain if the two exchanged words or not, but they went to different parts of the bus. The neighbor fell asleep, and when he awoke, Tomasz was nowhere to be seen. It's believed that a woman from his school was the next to see the missing man. She saw him at a train station 2 hours later, but wasn't sure if it was him or not. He did look different after all. Realizing that their son may have left on his own accord, the Dec family began contacting religious orders, but were unsuccessful in their efforts. The monasteries refused to divulge any personal information about their members, and that's where the trail runs eerily cold. It wouldn't be until 18 years later that the next clue in Tomas's disappearance would be found. In 2020, while doing some cleaning up around the house, Tomas's father stumbled across a baptismal certificate dating to September of 2001, the very month and year that the young man took that unexpected trip to visit his uncle. Again, the Dec's began calling all the religious orders in Poland and came up empty-handed. Several theories have circulated when it comes to this bizarre case, from a spiritual journey and cult activities to something far more sinister. Cults and religious orders each have a unique connection to salt and candles. Monks, the most favorable theory, believe that sprinkling salt in the corner of a house could bring in money, so perhaps Tomasz willingly disappeared into a Buddhist monk temple, but didn't want to leave his family with nothing. Did Tomasz join a monastery? Did he become a monk? Was he connected to some sort of cult? Or was his disappearance connected to something more sinister? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.